All right, I got a bit of a technical glitch, and I can't see if I'm streaming or not. So if anyone's out there, give me a message. Tell me I'm streaming. Greetings, hello everyone. I've got to unwrap this. I haven't even unwrapped it yet. Sorry about the sound. So thankfully it's a bit cooler here. We've had a hot few days. So this is, thankfully the plastic has kept it moist, so it's all good. Alright. There she goes. Alright. So we'll just have to start working on her while we have a bit of a chat. And yeah, chuck something in the comments if you want it, and I'll try and, I think I can see it today. I think I'll be able to interact if someone wants to message me, but otherwise message if you watch this after, and I'll keep an eye out for it, and I'll give you an answer. So today we're going to talk about, one of the things was we sort of lapsed a bit about the inauguration, because that's kind of relevant, big world news, isn't it? I'm just going to put the light on. So yeah, I just been having a bit of trouble getting my head out in the space, because I haven't really been following the inauguration too closely, because I guess my main thing is, once you sort of look into the idea of the New World Order, everything is kind of different. Like you're not looking at things through the same lens. That's what I find when you're looking at these world events. Once you understand that there is a group of people that are have been planning for a long time to set up a godless one world government, and to take over all the nations of the world and make a one world government under this. I can't think of another word but godless, because we've seen bits of this kind of thing in China and Russia during communism, because it's the same kind of spirit. It's dehumanizing. It's obviously people can be cruel and do horrific things under any government system, and they can also be amazing and do beautiful things under any system. But it certainly affects everything. Who is ruling and under what name things are being set up, and so. So the idea of the New World Order is, godless in the sense of just treating people like products, and only just looking after the people that are very powerful and at the top. And so there's been a huge surge in human trafficking around the world, and trafficking children. And that's all related to this, because it sort of operates on that kind of, I was going to say business industry. It's criminal, like it's always going to be thuggery. Like when the Nazis are in, I heard someone say that it was like the thugs were ruling, the criminal element was ruling. And so it's like that. And so that's why they kind of mostly hide what they're doing, and people don't kind of understand what they're doing, because they've got to keep hiding it, because the more it comes out in the open, the more people say, what? We don't want that, And the one that really stays in my mind as like a good example is that in China, they have these execution vans that go around, and when they're going to execute someone who is on some list, and a lot of them are just sort of people that don't agree with the government, that they'll send the van around, they'll execute them in the van and harvest their organs there and then, and that this is a real thing, and it's been going on for a while apparently. And you know, if you look into it, you find people who have escaped from an organ harvesting kind of a setup, and apparently they liked the Qigong people because they were so sort of pure and had such a pure lifestyle that their organs were really good. And so they sell their organs for huge amounts of money on the international market. And that, so for instance, if somebody needs kidneys, they'll have all the data of all their prisoners so that they can match someone to someone they've got as a prisoner, yoink out their kidneys, give them to the other person. If they fail, they'll get someone else and they'll give them their kidneys. So you can see, like, it's a framework that is just so different in their understanding of what has value or not. And because I guess in their mind, they don't, it's just sort of objects and things. You're just moving things around like anything else in life, you know. If you don't give special value to human life, that it's possible to have a whole framework where you have a whole different value system. And I think we've had a Christian world for so long that I think people that have grown up in the Christian world and maybe been conditioned to be critical of the Christian world don't necessarily understand what we've got and what we've had. And so anyway, that kind of ties in a lot also to my other topic, which is Satanism. That was the topic that we pulled out of the pumpkin pot. Because that's why you hear the sort of truther community talking about this sort of Satanist cabal, like keep calling them Satanists, because in a sense that's sort of the definition of Satanism, is when the self is at the center and given primacy. So anyway, yeah, Trump's inauguration. So the funny thing is, like, when before I sort of looked into this stuff and just accepting what I was hearing on the news and so on, it's like Trump seemed to represent this. Like, he seemed to represent sort of selfishness and vanity and empty culture. And he just didn't seem to be anything to do with what I valued. But as I've gone more and more on this journey, I've just seen different things. For one thing, I've seen how the media manipulates how we feel, because the media is sold out or bought by these people that are trying to take over the world. For a long time, there's evidence that the CIA has had the Project Mockingbird, which is having their people in the media. And so now it's got to the point where the mainstream media is virtually, it's not just some people, it's like the whole contraption is bought out and it's just a propaganda machine now. What was I saying? Can't remember. Trump, I think I was talking about Trump. So for a long time, I think we've been conditioned by the theatre of this New World Order. So if anyone's read Machiavelli, The Prince, I haven't read the whole thing, but you get the flavour of it. But I've dipped into it enough to know that it's about this sort of heartless kind of leadership that is just pragmatic to the nth degree. And so a lot of it is about how you appear versus what you do, and that with the understanding that sometimes you do things or that the ends justifies the means, and that doesn't really matter what you have to do to get what you want to happen, but as part of that you have to create a picture of what is happening, a picture of yourself, like that you should go and be religious, be seen to be a religious person. So even these people that are sort of anti-Christian, they will sort of tip the hat to that side of things because they know how important it is to to have that as part of their image. For a long time, we've had very cultivated images of these big politicians that get sort of trained in how to present themselves. And so I think the funny thing is that even though Trump is sort of can be kind of gauche and not very sophisticated and come across awkward or funny, I think he's actually more genuine than a lot of the people that come up like, what's his name? Obama. Obama is slick as they come, you know, and he sort of gave everyone the feeling of that he was this authentic Black American who really cared about people. But it turns out he is just a puppet of the New World Order. He never grew up as a Black American. He grew up in very wealthy families in Hawaii and I think Indonesia or something. And so these appearances can be deceptive, and people get addicted, or they sort of get used to these kind of little indicators that are being taken note of with these people that are maybe doing much worse things. Like Trump might do some stupid things, but I think the people that are deceiving us are doing much worse things that we couldn't even comprehend. But they keep a shiny surface to keep everyone sort of tricked and part of the show in the show. But I think it's all coming down, and that's what I feel excited about. I don't think they can keep that up anymore in the world that we've got that's beginning to open up now. So what did I want to say? I wanted to say about, let's have a look at my notes, see if I got any ideas of what I want to say. Yeah, I guess it was just, I was thinking about why I see him as a positive. Like I say, I think a lot of people, I feel a bit upset now because my friend who comes from South America has been messaging me, and she's very upset because Trump is apparently being tough with Colombia at the moment, and that's her home country. And so she's wanting me to see how terrible he is and how it's inhumane what he's doing. And I'm open to the idea I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of these, and I certainly don't know what's going on with that. But I think the whole thing about the border is certainly a huge issue that needs addressing, because part of the New World Order agenda is the open borders, and it's got to do with being able to that they support a lot of their activities through guns and drugs and human trafficking, and so it makes it a lot easier if they've got open borders. So yeah, I and there's theories about why they're moving around, that it feels like it's more than just a natural moving around of people that's going on in the world at the moment. It feels like an artificial shifting of cultures going on and moving people around. And it feels like, yeah, Trump's going to put a stop to that in that American situation where there was been people coming from all over the world and just rocking up down there at the border and just being able to walk straight into America. So I don't know what, like, but I do know that I feel like if anyone takes a leadership position and they have to fix up messy situations, people are going to get upset. Like, there's no way around that. And that's a big part of being a leader, is that you're able to see what needs to be done and proceed and do it even though it upsets people. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing harm to people. It might be that you're doing good, but that it causes a lot of emotion and reaction in the process. Whereas I think that the New World Order uses that sort of our emotionality to kind of keep pacifying emotion and actually harness people's emotion to manipulate them and to do what they want or to see what they want to see. And so I think one of the huge important things at the moment in this time we're in is to be really clear-headed and really be able to see through tricks and to be able to really look for evidence and don't just get carried away with your emotions. Sort of, emotions obviously are important, but we don't want to be driven by our emotions because we can end up getting to places we don't want to be. Where's my other tool? All right, so yeah, I'll keep trying to understand the situation, and so I think Trump's sending people back to their countries of origin, the people that are. So yeah, it's sort of out of my jurisdiction. I don't really understand all that, but I've worried that people like my friend are maybe being made to feel like things are more sort of evil than they actually are, but we'll see, and only time will tell, really. But sort of linking into this other subject of Satanism, that it, as I say, it also ties into the New World Order because if you're not going to God for your sort of supernatural power, then you've got to go somewhere. And the only other place is the sort of lower dimensions of the spiritual realm. And so these people that make themselves the enemy of God do use dark spiritual forces to do that. That human beings have always, on all times and places will always be sort of hungry for a spiritual kind of understanding. And so natural religion has always produced a lot of what we call witchcraft, which is finding ways to harness spiritual power to serve self. And that's kind of what witchcraft is. Like, I'm not saying that everyone who's interested in alternative spirituality is desiring to do evil. But I'm saying if you're accessing spiritual power outside of God's authority, then the strongest gravity that's going to pull you is going to be self, whether it's your own self or somebody else's self, but it's going to be self. So natural religion tends towards finding ways to feel safe in the universe and feel like you've got power and protection, and that has meant looking to spiritual entities for that. And that sometimes we don't realize how kind of evil people can be. Like I said, we take it for granted, our kind of Christian world and the standards and the ideas that we hold to be true. Hang on, I'm just getting that we sort of imagine that they're self-evident, that all human beings would naturally believe the same things, but it's not true, that people can believe all kinds of wacky things and do all kinds of horrific things that to them seem normal and right. Like it comes to mind is like the what is it? The really famous ones in South America. Anyway, that they do these horrible, there's evidence of this horrific kind of human sacrifice. And I remember my friend describing, cutting the skin off. She'd been reading about it, cutting the skin off the victim and wearing it, and it all had significance of taking the beating heart out of the body and holding it, or, God knows what. So human beings, and I could go on. I'm not an anthropologist, but I know a few stories about different things that can become normal and natural in human society that we imagine people wouldn't do things like that, but they do. People do horrible things, and that sort of starts to make sense of why there was such a prohibition on the children of Israel to not mix with the people around them, because they were sacrificing their children. They were taking their children and sacrificing them to their God in through a ritual of fire, and that, you know, and that sort of goes deep into the human psyche, that it's very easily becomes something that's acceptable to people. But we live in a world that's had a lot, you know, thousands of years of separating ourselves from that till it becomes like, what? Why would you do that? That's crazy, you know. But as we're learning in this, what's happening at the moment is it's not that far away for people to start doing these horrendous things. And there are certain sort of family lines you come across in people's stories that have never really stopped doing these things. You know, there's plenty of stories, and like in the, I think it was the 90s, like they talk about the satanic panic of the 80s, and it became a sort of laughing at people for having this fear of Satanism, because it's the sort of thing you hear the stories and they're so horrific. People are like, what? And they're horrified and they want to find out all about it, but then it gets flipped, and then it becomes, oh, only a stupid person would believe that was possible. Like, people don't do things like that. That's outrageous. That's crazy. And then it becomes an embarrassment. You're showing your lack of sophistication if you believe these things. But, you know, that's dangerous if you worry too much about whether or not you look sophisticated. Truth is important, absolutely. Things need to be verified, things need to be understood, but things can be covered up, and, you know, you've got to watch out that you're not being made to feel foolish for looking at things that maybe you need to look at and maybe you need to understand. The same thing happened with the Pizzagate thing, that someone I knew, when I was first talking about conspiracy theories with them, they were sort of like, oh, you know, like Pizzagate, like as if it's obviously that's been proven to be something that was just crazy conspiracy theories. I don't know it deeply, but I've seen enough to know there was something really going on there, and it looked horrific. You know, there's real evidences of things, and there's real evidences of the kind of abuse that goes on in high places. It's all coming out, though. It's all coming out, hey. But so one of the interesting characters about all this stuff is Kathy O'Brien, that I was just looking at an interview of her again recently. So this is another one that I discovered at the beginning of my journey into looking into the, what do you call it? I don't know, conspiracy theories. Like, to my experience, it was like, I felt like with the first video that kind of, because it was COVID, and someone had sent me a video and I started looking at it and I thought, oh, that's crazy. Like, someone was talking about vaccines, and it was before there was even a vaccine in the picture, and I was like, and he was just all emotional, and I thought it was just crazy. And then someone sent me another one of a woman explaining stuff, and she was talking about 5G in relation to COVID. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. That, you know, what are you talking about? But then someone else sent me the same video of the same woman with the same thing, and it was somebody that I valued their opinion, so I thought, all right, I better have a look. So I had a look, and it was like, what? You know, and she had a lot of evidence and a lot of, you know, it obviously wasn't just crazy talk. It was something that was studyable and verifiable. So that started me off on that journey of looking into things and discovering about the New World Order, which, you know, we've all sort of, once again, it gets turned into a joke. New World Order, the Illuminati, conspiracy theorists, they become foolish But I think that's by design. So people, it's a very strong feeling in people to not want people to think that they're foolish, to demonstrate that they're clever and sophisticated. And I think that's a big tool that's used to stop people looking in certain areas for that purpose, for the purpose of obscuring what's really going on. Because if you go looking, and I mean, it's a sort of an area also, Satanism and child abuse in relation to Satanism, or human abuse generally, it's not something you naturally, normal, good people naturally like, oh, that's something I want to look into. You don't want to look into it, and it's awful. I don't like looking into it. But it's important to know what you're really dealing with. And so Kathy O'Brien there was also a video, if anyone's sort of interested in understanding this, but I can't remember the name of it now. It was sort of going around early on, and it was somebody who had been a stunt artist. Is that the right word? In Hollywood, and he'd sort of got cotton on to what was going on with the abuse of children, and he sort of pulled out and separated himself, and then he made a documentary sort of trying to expose it. And that was a really good one in terms of like they had people giving evidence that was pretty hard to refute. It felt like he had a lot of real evidence, like doctors talking about, that have to sort of put these children's bodies back together again after they've been abused and that kind of thing. Like, at certain level, these things are just known about, But so my path led me to Kathy O'Brien, and she is a whistleblower from the 90s. She first came out as someone who had been rescued from being a sex slave, a Operation Monarch sex slave. I don't know how to a name that'll mean something to someone, whoever's watching. But the idea is that, so apparently, like, you get these family lines where sexual abuse is a normal part of their growing up. And because abusing children does something to the way your brain operates. Oh, hi, David. To the way your brain operates. And orders things, and it creates compartmentalization because the sexual abuse is so traumatic to the psyche. It gets sort of separated off, and it creates a barrier around that, so you're not having access to that information in ordinary day-to-day life. And so for people who love power more than anything, this becomes a means of having power over people and being able to be powerful through these damaged souls. So Kathy O'Brien's father, or both her mother and father, she says, had been abused in their childhood, and they in turn were abusing her, particularly her father, and started to film it and I think pimp her out, and just unspeakable things that you can't believe is real. And then the CIA they caught him sending this pornography through the mail, but what they did is, because they were really interested in mind control and all this stuff to do with the abuse of children, and so they came to him and said that they wouldn't prosecute if he sold his daughter to them as part of their Monarch program. And so the monarch program is like MK Ultra. It's to do with mind control and creating sex slaves and agents. But the monarch part is a multi-generational system, where, because apparently this is what Kathy O'Brien was saying the other day. I saw her, that people that are from families that have had this on for generations, they become compliant to another degree, because it becomes sort of entrained into their genes, like in a sort of parasympathetic. No, what's the word? There's a word about the genes. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but so she became part of this Operation Monarch, and then she was used as a sex slave. And so she's someone, like a lot of these people that come out as whistleblowers, they don't name names. There is another woman, I can't remember her name at the moment, that I see a lot. And I mean, there's stacks and stacks now that are coming out and trying to expose this. But there's this sort of European woman from Belgium, I think, and she started naming names on the podcast, podcast. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but she started naming names, and I was interested that she was similar, like Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. Apparently he was very sadistic, horrible abuser. So there's a lot of these, of course, Kissinger, of course, all these New World Order people are all part of this, abusing these little children. And what was I going to say? Something about who she named. But so she names the Clintons, the Bushes, I remember there's an awful story about Madeleine Albright. But the interesting thing about her case, I think, is that she actually took it to court because she was still trying to get, like, she had a daughter while she was in the program, and she got sort of rescued by someone who was an agent, but they could see what they were doing in these projects, these secret projects, and he saw it, and so he rescued her out and then taught her how to get free from that programming. But her face is getting worse, I think. So she names names, and that's right, they went to court, and it officially got thrown out of court because of national security. It wasn't that, like, because anyone can take something through the courts, I think, but they had to stop it because of national security, which to me means it's true. It's real. So she's written a book called The Transformation of America, I think it's called, and that's very interesting. So one of the things I find interesting in her story that she's very adamant about, and I saw just this interview just the other day. So she's been around for a long time. So since 98 or something, she got released from this program, and she's been on this journey and trying to raise awareness and trying to tell people her story. But so it got thrown out of court, and naming names, what was I going to say? Can't remember. But so this kind of abuse of children is what you would call satanic. So it's where all your values get corrupted and just focus around the exaltation of self, the gaining power, gaining wealth, prestige. And so, we always jokingly hear these stories about selling your soul to the devil. But it's true. You can. And, and it makes sense of the story of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. because for what he had to do for humanity, he had to go through this process that we all hit up against to some degree or other, of these areas of life. So there was the bread, so he was tempted to turn the stone into bread, to just use his power willy-nilly for his own appetite. And so he said, that's where he said, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So it was putting things into their right order. So God's word is up here. My need for food, which is real, has to be subservient to that. Because Satanism is that, where my need, my desire, my want, myself is above the word of God. So even if I think, oh yeah, the word of God is valuable and it's true, but it can never have its rightful place if I've put self above. And that's what the tempter does. He tempts us to put self above. And so so that's the first one, is just the basic sort of appetite level of life that we all experience. That's part of our journey, is to put it in its right place, to not have it running the show. And then the next one is I can't remember if it's the world or the temple, but let's say the temple. No, let's say the world. So the world is the next one, which is all the kingdoms of the world. So it's worldly power and kingship and authority. And so the tempter says, bow down and worship me, and I'll give it all to you. And this is clearly what people get tempted with. That they think that just this little temporal life that you're in at the moment is all there is. And they see real means of gaining power and authority within this paradigm. And so they are willing to worship the thing that will give them that. But Jesus, of course, refuted that and said, you worship the Lord God, your God, and nobody else. And then the last one is the temple, and it's go up on the temple and throw yourself down, because if you're really the Son of God, if you've really got this power, you won't be hurt. And so it's the temptation to use spiritual power once again for me, for my means, for my what I want, what I'm going to get out of it. And so that was the tempter again. So these people that get caught in these situations in life have been tricked by the tempter. And so the most important thing, I think, as part of our kind of journey to stop these terrible things happening in our world, first of all, we can't stop other people. We can't sort of control other people's will. But the more we control our own will, the more we conquer the tempter, the more we live from that place of right relationship with God, the more that changes the atmosphere in the world we live in. Like just one person can change the atmosphere of a whole city. So that's the most powerful thing you can do. And that's the route I've been taking. Like, it's most important is my spiritual state, not getting upset about other people's spiritual state or how I should try to stop them. But my first priority is my spiritual state and the state of my soul. And then sorry, I'm just wondering if I can pull this together in time, this sculpture. In my mind, when I was thinking about it during the week, I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. Like, no worries. I'll just whip it up in half an hour. But it's like, I don't know if it's going to be that simple. Because it's like sometimes the initial thing can be sort of quicker in a way, and then as you get down to subtleties of expression, it gets a bit trickier. So I wanted to, when I was thinking about it during the week, I thought I'd make her, the idea would be, I wanted to somehow make it like that she was being showered with like beautiful things like flowers. And I thought I'd call it showers of blessing. Showers of blessing. I can't remember how it goes. My mum comes out with that one sometimes. There's an old hymn, I think. Yes, so I'll try and let's see if we can start making some flowers or something to give that. I might need some support. I think she's going to lean over and fall over. Is she? No, she's not too wobbly. All right. Where was I? Satanism. Oh yeah, the gates of hell. All right. Oh yeah. So we were talking about temptation, yeah, and like us being most important for us to get ourselves in a right space with God, and that's the biggest influence we have, and like to then also, as Jesus said, not to hide your light under a bushel. So make sure that you're dealing with yourself, that the self part of you inside is coming and submitting to God. And it's like God knows how hard it is for us to resist when the tempter really gets us at our weak points. God knows that we are frail and that our natural self will be tempted to do things that we don't necessarily want to do because we feel vulnerable in this life. We feel like we need things that get offered to us at weak moments, and we take them. And so that's why Jesus came, and that's why part of what he had to do was to confront, that he had to have all that physical self himself to live through, to know how to stand up to those temptations. Like he had to go through that for real as God come as a man, so that then us who know him and live in him, we learn how to, that when we find ourselves in that space and we find ourselves out of our depth and we know we can't resist in ourself because we're weak in our flesh, then we run to him because he understands and he knows, and he is our strong tower and he is the one that protects us from that. But the trick is learning to identify it and do that rather than, but sometimes you got to go through the falling for the temptation, getting tricked, fall on your face, make a mess, feel dirty, feel disgusting. And sometimes that can lead people off, but other times, hopefully, that even if you've fallen into the crap and you've made a mess, that you then turn around again and call out to God for help, because that's what this is all about. It's about it's like teaching you to walk in the Spirit. So the same as when you're a little baby and you learn to walk in your flesh, you had to fall down a lot, you had to make mistakes, but you had to keep at the center is your intention. And but that's what we have Jesus for, is he keeps being able to pick us up and clean us off and get us out of our messes and help us to understand that he knows and he wants us to grow through all this stuff. He's not just standing around waiting to see us make a mess and see, I told you you're stupid and you're weak and you can't do it. It's like, nah. He's like, come on, I know you can do it. I want you to be better. I want you to get out of this phase so you can get onto the next phase and see all the wonderful things I got planned for you and the next plane that I'm going to take you to. Come on, you can do it. So yeah, we got to even feel sympathy, I think, for our brothers and sisters that have fallen for the tricks of the devil and found themselves in way over their head and not believed that Jesus can rescue them, or still believing the lies of the devil that Jesus wants to just take from us, and he's going to take everything we love from us and make our lives boring and weak. But that's just lies. That's not true, of course. That's just to keep us in that cycle of failure. Failure pretending to be success. Oh, I've just got her mouth open. It looks terrible. I'm going to turn it around and see if you can see that. Oh, don't know about that. All right. All right, a bit more close mouth. Close your mouth. All right, where am I up to? Somebody help me. So I wanted to talk about the gates of hell because there's a story in the gospel of Jesus taking the disciples to a place called Caesarea Philippi. Oh no, she's getting like, if I make her mouth, oh, she's a bit like, she's a bit like, she's going down into hell. It's not quite showers a blessing. That's not what I'm after. So there's a story of Jesus going to, taking the disciples to Caesarea Philippi, which was a place in the region where they were around Israel or Jerusalem. Israel, it's in Israel, I don't know. But anyway, it's near the base of where the River Jordan comes out. And so it used to be a place of blessing. But some of the kings of Israel had used it as a place for human sacrifice. They got tricked, they got deceived by these entities that tempt people, like we've been talking about, into doing things that are wrong and against God and against our very souls, but that we think are going to get us gain. And I think a lot of times, like even in these times, I think when these spiritual forces get hold of us, it does actually feel like God. Like I think we experience it as like, this is actually God that wants me to do this. And I think that's how in cults and stuff people can do such horrendous things, because if you get too submerged in this stuff on a subjective level, this spiritual stuff gets the feeling, an aura of right and good in some funny sort of way. So it's pretty scary because you can end up doing horrific things, even if you started out thinking you were a good person and you wanted to do good, or to some degree. So they go to Caesarea Philippi. So that this region is where in the past, the kings of Israel had sacrificed their children to foreign gods, and it had become an unclean place. And then the pagan people had moved in there, and they had set up their altars to their gods, principally Pan. And that's an interesting subject, Pan, and where he fits into everything. But so Pan was represented as a goat man. And so part of their worship there in that region was with the goat. They had goats there, and I don't know if you can hear that music, but I might get copyright strike. So they used to have the goats around there. If you look it up, you see where there's the remnants of where they had temples there, temples to Pan, and people would come there for part of that pagan worship. And it was called the Gates of Hell because there was a big cave that came out at the bottom of the mountain, and there was gushing water, like huge amount of gushing water used to come out of the mountain, and it was part of what then went on to become the Jordan River. So as I said, it had been a place of blessing, like where the mouth of the Jordan, but it became something else. It became a place of evil. And so they used to sacrifice goats there. I believe human sacrifice as well. The Pan worshippers, I don't know, they throw them into this rushing water is sacrificed to their gods. And they would do sexual acts with goats, I think, is part of the worship there. So the from what I've read is the idea that a religious Jew would not go there. So it's interesting to sort of like, it's not actually in the text, but once you read around it and you start to get a bit of a picture of like, oh, okay, something more going on here than is on the surface. So they're at this place where pagan worship goes on, and they where that it's not expected that they would go to a place like this. So so this is where Jesus asked the disciples. He says, "Who do you think I am?" Or no, I think he starts with, "Who do people say I am?" And they say, or some people say John the Baptist, some people say Elijah or one of the prophets. And then he says, "Well, who do you say I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And so at this point, of course, he's not coming out and declaring to people who he is. He's just being who he is. And people are hypothesizing and wondering, who is he? And so Jesus has this response to Peter saying this, and is excited and says that flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So what he's saying is like, it's an exciting moment for him, because it's like the seeds he's been planting are spiritual seeds, and he's seeing some leaf coming in Peter when Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God," because he knows that he couldn't have that revelation as a natural understanding. He could see that it was a spiritual revelation. And that's where he says that you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church. But the word he uses for rock in the second time is different from the first rock. The second rock is more like a cliff face, whereas the first one is a rock. So in a way, it's like the rock is Christ, is the revelation, is the New Jerusalem, the firm foundation that seems to be non-existent to those who don't know, but is the most solid thing in the universe to put your trust in. So that's the rock, the foundation rock that is the revelation of Christ. And that Peter is a small version of that. So that is when we get that revelation, we become that rock in ourselves, the version that we are. And that, so then Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. So, and the word for church is ecclesia, which is, it's an interesting word. I don't know how deeply to go into this, because it means called out ones. But the interesting thing is that it comes from two different words. The first word is ek, and ecclesia. I can't remember if it's said exactly like that when it's separate from ek. But the word ek comes from a word that means to be born, to be taken out of a woman into another reality. So it has a particular meaning of coming from within something to out of it. So it could mean out of the ecclesia are the called out ones, the called out of maybe natural Israel, but maybe it's also being born of the Spirit. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But anyway, the born again ones, I think it's like that's what it's all about. It's like this revelation that God has brought through Christ, and that understanding that is where the power is. And then he says, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against his church. And I think, if we're talking about this place where they are, that was called in local parlance the gates of hell. So this place where this huge cave was, the depth of where the water was, they didn't have any way to measure the depth. It was so deep, And so it became connected with this concept of the gates of hell, like hell being the place, the abode of the dead, like the sort of the underworld. And that all these, so in my mind, it's like all these seeking worldly power are being formed on this temptation that the tempter brings to use power for wrong reasons outside of the authority of God, and that worldly power is based on that authority and that power and that rock, which is what. So where they are, this it's a rock face where the gates of hell is in this Caesarea Philippi. There's this huge rock face, and I think it represents on the physical level this feeling of solidness, like of you having wealth, like the feeling if I was rich, then I would be secure and safe and strong. If I had power, if I had good looks, if I had whatever it is that we attempted to think is the source of power and authority, that's what that represents, that gates of hell. It's like the power of the underworld that you're sort of investing in, contrasted with the revelation of Christ, which is from the sense body doesn't exist. Where is it? Like people can go through their whole life and say, it doesn't exist. I can't see it. What are you talking about? Whereas those of us that have had the revelation know it's the most real thing in the universe, even though we're confused by the world we live in about that at times. The revelation shows us that that's the real thing. That's where real power and authority is. And that we have to go into meekness to stay connected to that. And that's where the real power and authority is. And that so what I think is happening in that transaction is that he is declaring that all those powers of the worldly kingdoms that are based on the use of dark spiritual forces are on notice. And so then what he then goes on to establish is the ecclesia, which then turns into Christendom, which is just this huge force of the world that has changed the world. And that but that the forces of that other reality are always in conflict with the kingdom that's based on the revelation of Christ. And that's what we're up against now. That's these same forces are trying to undo Christianity, trying to undo the Christian world, because it's the only thing that stops them. Apart from that, they can run the world. They have all worldly power and authority, so that if a country doesn't have Christ over them, they can do whatever they want. But and so they've been tricking us to take Christ out of our culture and to disown him so that they can come in and ravage our world, our Christian world. But God's plan is, as far as I understand it, is it's a double whammy, because they think they're trying to take over the world and they're going to succeed in destroying us. But what is really happening, I think, from God's perspective, is he's doing a big cleanup. You know, he's doing a big cleanup of his kingdom, which he came to establish on the earth, and that the gates of hell will not prevail against those who have the revelation of who Christ is and who live in that place. But all they can do is trick us into believing it, trick us into losing our authority and our power by tricking us to step back into that visible rock. You can see that visible power and authority that we can see with our senses. So Satanism is real. You know, like a lot of Satanists sort of want to say, oh, we're just so sophisticated. We don't really believe in the devil or God. We just believe in, looking out for yourself and being rational. But you know, there's enough evidence. There's just such awful stuff going on in our world, and it's all got to do with that weakness of human beings to be tempted to give up what's really valuable, to think that they can have power and authority outside of their identity as God's creation, God's children. Yeah. I can't really think of anything else to talk about. I think we'll leave it there. I feel like I got too engrossed and I didn't do enough on the sculpture to finish. I thought I was going to finish. What I'll do is I'll finish the stream, and I'll keep working on it today, and I'll take a photo of it later and put it up. Okay. Peace be with you. Love you. Bye.